But the reason this is not allowing it to shift at this point is this kink in the cable. If you're the person that gets to help April try to fix this on the road or on the trail someday, I'm sorry. I was trying to have you not have to fix it.
Two-wheel drive. Listen. Nope, not supposed to be bent like that. Feels good to me.
Gently set it down on the lock. Gently.
I tried gently.
So, another day in the shop. April is back from Rock Junction. If you've seen the earlier video, you can see where she had some problems with the transfer case, some strange noises, had some various folks looking at it. Thank you to everybody that helped her out. Looks like, at very least, shift linkage came loose, other assorted noises. At this point, the transfer case is not shifting back into low range, and so the question is why and what exactly needs to be replaced as a result. So we're going to do some diagnostic. We're going to spend some time looking at what's going on. Hopefully it's simply a matter of the shift cable's been damaged, but we'll verify as best we can health of transfer case, transmission, make sure there's not more that needs to be fixed. So the shift linkage lives up in this cavity above the skid plate, above the drive shaft, behind the control arm. It's just up in this space that's not really easy to get to. There's a lot of room in there, and just not a lot of access.
It's its own version of a pinch point.
Kind of. Now, by virtue of having the vehicle up in the air, there is actually more space than you would have had when you were there.
On the trailer?
On the trailer. So if you come around where I'm at, so coming around from this point of view, we can actually see all of the linkage and the affected bracket that was loose and what we're going to do. So what I think we need to do here, and just a matter of how much disassembly is necessary to achieve it, is to start by taking the transfer case end of the shift linkage, which you can see just above and to the left of the transfer case yoke. Need to take that loose and verify that it is actually moving correctly as the shift lever moves, because all ends of this thing are currently fixed, which means for the shift lever to move, that linkage should be moving. And actually, I think I may have April climb up on the ladder and move the shift lever for us so we can see whether or not any of this is actually moving before we take it apart.
It's a good thing I like roller coasters. Oh yeah!
Okay, so looking at what's happening with our linkage here, we've got the transfer case in two-wheel drive, and the front axle hub's unlocked so I can spin the drive shaft. Try moving it to four-wheel drive.
Okay.
Yeah, so we see that the top half of the cable is moving up at the shifter, and there is nothing happening.
Four-wheel drive. Or two-wheel drive.
Yeah, I mean we can see that the shifter is moving. We can see that the top half of the cable theoretically is moving, but there is nothing happening on the bottom half at all. So I think just as a matter of having access to what we need to do, and the assumption, and not much of an assumption at this point, that at the very least we're going to be putting a new cable in it, and we have to go through an adjustment process with that new cable. I think the easiest is going to be to go ahead and just drop the skid plates to gain access. One of the nice things with this IRO lift kit is they actually use a separate transmission crossmember from the skid plate so that this belly skid can be removed without dropping the suspension or dropping the transmission. So we can actually remove the skid plate and get access up in there to the shift linkage and everything else. All right, we've got the engine's skid plate out. We have the transmission belly skid out. This is what I was talking about earlier. That's kind of a nice aspect of the IRO kit, is that the separate bracket over here that supports the suspension pieces, and then a separate transmission crossmember which is not the belly skid. I will point out while we're here, this is part of the noise that we have on this Jeep, and it's just that this space in here where the catalytic converter lives is very, very tight.
Is that the rattling I hear every once in a while?
This could very well be part of your rattling.
I said it was exhaust. I guess I was right.
Because, yeah, it looks like this has sagged over time from where it was, and we now have the catalytic converter actually resting on the, this is part of the suspension bracketry. So, yeah, it's not sitting up as high. It kind of looks like our bushing here on the crossmember that actually supports it may be working its way out of its spot. We'll take a look at that a little bit closer as we go to put this thing back together. Okay, drive shaft's out. Grab some electrical tape, please.
Yes, sir.
So, with the drive shaft out of here, we've got a lot more space to work around this linkage. We need to take the connection here apart, because this is the piece that actually drives the transfer case. And then we can kind of see up here, this is not supposed to have this big wide bend in the cable. And because of that, you can just see that the shifter is just kind of flopping around in here, not doing anything. So we need to take this apart, take this apart. We'll take the cable out of the brackets. The brackets themselves look okay, so probably leave them alone.
But they come with the kit. And actually, the guys said that the bracket that's attached to the body was bent to crap and needs to be pulled apart and straightened. Or we just use the replacement one that comes with the new cable.
I was gonna say probably just use the replacement one. So that's 4 high, and that's 2 high. So the transfer case shifts. Now, in terms of a potential field repair that could have happened, mind you, all the teardown that we've done would have had to have been done on the trailer or on the trail. Basically, getting the shift linkage disconnected from the lever would have allowed the vehicle to be manually put into 4 low, and then it could have been driven and potentially could have done a couple more days of wheeling without the option of shifting into other transfer case modes. But that's a good sign. The transfer case still shifts, and without a ridiculous amount of effort. So hopefully, we drain some fluid out of it, we'll know that it's good. The shift linkage here is definitely toast, so we're gonna get this out of here.
Replacement parts ordered. Let's hope that's all it is.
All right, so we've got the shift linkage out of the vehicle, and the way this is supposed to work is it's a push-pull assembly where this is normally the transmission or transfer case end. This pushes and pulls to get us where we want. Now what has happened is this kink in the cable that probably occurred when the bracket came loose. And you can see where the end of this bracket was loose and got pounded. And if you look at like the edge here, you can just see that, yeah, this took a beating.
That would probably be against the double cardan.
Probably against the double cardan end there at the
Okay.
transfer case yoke. But the reason this is not allowing it to shift at this point is this kink in the cable. So another potential field fix for this would have been to just get in there and cut the end of the cable, which then would have allowed this to move. But as it was, that pulled up tight into this collar was not allowing this to go backward any further, which was necessary to get it into four-wheel drive.
So when we put the new bracket on, we need to really focus on ensuring that the bracket never comes loose again.
Well, we need it to not come loose. Yeah.
That is true.
Lock nuts or something other. What they did with these originally is they used this rubber grommet arrangement, and presumably either over time the screws vibrated loose, worked out of the rubber grommet, or something else happened to cause it to fail. When we get the other one, we'll investigate other options, because at this point now the holes on the body side are wallowed out, and so we've actually got a little bit more, shall we say, flexibility in terms of how this would mount. So when we get the new bracket, we'll look into possibly doing it differently, maybe a Loctite, maybe some Loctite. Because we're a little bit concerned that the transfer case and or transmission may have been partially involved in this, we're going to go ahead and do a fluid change on both. We're going to filter the fluid as it comes out, though, and look for any metal that's in there. So this is just pulling the drain plug on the transfer case that is here. Okay, not seeing anything significant in the filter. And the fluid just looks like fluid.
I'm chasing you. Yeah, that is clean. Okay.
Okay, so back out under the stronger light, looking at what came out of the transmission. Not really seeing too much.
What is that?
There are some pieces in here that don't feel metallic. So I think that's probably just dirt from the drain plug.
Sure.
And probably the sealant. Because yeah, there's other pieces here that again they're not metallic. Is dark. So there's definitely dirt in it, but there's no sparklies. There's no metallic pieces. So I think we're in pretty good shape in terms of the engine and transmission not being implicated in this. So this is a manual transmission, and it has a magnetic drain plug. And so we do see there are some metal bits that have been captured by the magnet. Now the fact that the fluid came out clean and the magnet's doing its job, it's capturing the metal. And it's a manual transmission, so there's always going to be some grinding of gears and things like that happen. This doesn't look too bad. But yeah, there's a little bit of metallic sludge, which again for a manual transmission is kind of a normal thing unless you're really, really good with your shifts and not grinding, and never let a novice drive your vehicle. And even then you're going to get some just because it's a manual transmission.
1 week later.
All right, another day in the shop, picking things up, putting Penny back together, following the other problems we've had. Our new parts have come in to repair the shift linkage. Because this is not something that is really repairable in terms of straightening the cable, we went ahead and ordered a replacement kit. It also allows us to replace this bracket, which when it came loose was damaged. So what we have here is the replacement kit,
From?
Novak conversions, and we see that this cable is supposed to be straight. Now it does slide in and out, although you'll notice that it doesn't ever expose the cable as this moves. This one, the relevant pieces are clearly not as protected. So we've got a new cable in its entirety that moves as it should. We have a new bracket, and because it's a complete new kit, we have a new transfer case side bracket as well. This is identical to the one that's already on the Jeep, and so there's no point in dismounting a piece of steel to just bolt one that looks just like it in place. So this we will leave alone, maybe save that for another project. Now, the actual failure that occurred. This uses these little rubber grommets or rubber bushings to hold the bracket in place. And the way these work is very much like a hollow wall anchor, or honestly a lot like a nutsert, in that as the bolt is tightened, it wants to compress the rubber, which makes it then become a tighter fit in the hole. Over time, these worked their way out, which then allowed this bracket to become free. So
I really had no idea that that bracket had come free, because all I saw was the tops of the bolts and I couldn't see the nuts underneath. So I had no idea that those nuts had disappeared.
So before we put this in place, we may look at alternatives to attaching it. Now, there's a lot of options into how we could do this. The way this actually works, this comes from the tunnel side. So you put that in, the bolt comes from this direction, and it expands inside this hole to hold it in place. We could potentially do a nutsert. This would be the nutsert that matches this screw in terms of size, but that quite definitely does not match in terms of the size of the hole in the bracket. The simplest answer might be, some washers and lock nuts to hold this together, but
So the lock nut solution was actually the trail side fix that we did.
yeah, you went and bought some hardware and some washers and just to bolt that in. The way this works, one end of this goes to the transfer case and tightens down. The other end goes to the shifter in the floor of the Jeep. And the first thing we're going to do, because we're keeping this side of the bracket, is we're going to go ahead and connect this up to the shifter in the Jeep after feeding this through.
And by the bracket, you mean the extra bracket here.
This bracket. So this is always one of those tough choices of, do I put Loctite on it, which is going to make it more difficult to take this apart later, but less likely to come loose on its own, or do I just tighten it and hope that it doesn't come loose? Given that our failure in this instance was because it came loose on its own, I'm going to opt for the paranoid approach, and if you're the person that gets to help April try to fix this on the road or on the trail someday, I'm sorry. I was trying to have you not have to fix it.
Well, I guess that's a new use for a trash can.
All right, so pointing it out, this right here is the bracket that we are going to reuse. So this is where the shift cable will come out when he gets it assembled. And then the other bracket mounts up right here, which goes out into the transmission tunnel and into the cabin.
So stabbing that through the bracket, followed by a washer. followed by a nut that is going to be good fun.
This is why these little stubby wrenches are super, super helpful. I don't know that I'm going to be able to show you much of anything. There's just no room, and hands need room to work.
So there's a bushing. It only goes one way.
This is where a ratcheting wrench would be really handy.
And then the nylock. This one I did put some Loctite on because I can put a wrench on both ends of it. Okay. So now we have our cable attached to our linkage, attached to our shift lever. I want to make sure...
Shift lever or transfer case?
This is the transfer case shift lever.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So now what we want to do, this is currently all the way forward. This is in the two-wheel drive position. We want to make sure that we can cycle it all the way to the other end, and that our cable here is not going to bind as we do that. Okay. So what we're going to do, shift this by hand. Okay, so that's four-wheel drive, 4 high. That should be neutral. That sure seems like a neutral. Just want something I can push with. And push a little harder than I can push from the floor. That's interesting. That does not want to shift all the way in. And this does seem to suggest we're probably close to the limit of the travel of the cable.
The rubber things are falling off already.
Yep. Okay, so that did just push further in. Hopefully you caught that on tape.
I did.
I think I must have left the transmission in gear because it does not want to turn.
Oh, there's a thought. All right, I got to help. He sent me up a ladder. Yes, Penny was in first gear. So I threw in a neutral.
It's not immediately trying to pop out of gear, which is what I was concerned that it might do. So we'll run it through all of its positions again. So this is for low currently, and if we pull this back one click, that should be neutral, and that has all the evidence of being neutral. That felt like that went twice, so that should be...
Yeah, it did. That almost looks like it's two-wheel drive.
Probably a two-wheel drive, yep. Which is fine. So then we'll go back one position if we can, ever so carefully.
No, that's 4.
That should be, ideally, that's 4 low.
Yeah. So you went from 2 high to 4.
Well, it feels like it's moving through all the positions then. Just not as precisely as I would like, but given I'm yanking on the end of the cable, that's somewhat less than ideal from a precision standpoint, so.
So have you decided how you're going to put this together? I mean, you expressed the options earlier. I think the answer is no.
No, I haven't decided yet.
So off-camera discussion on which way we wanted to go. We've decided on rib nuts, which means we need to get the hardware that Kenneth was mentioning earlier. Yeah, there's a rib nut. We just don't have any nuts and bolts, or I guess we don't need nuts, any bolts that will work in that particular rib nut. So Kenneth's going to go ahead and install the rib nuts, but we need to go ahead and get that hardware. We can't do it tonight. It's late on a Sunday. Everything's closed. And we aren't blessed with a, big old nut and bolt
tray like some of the others. So we're going to go ahead and probably call it a night and maybe come back at this another night this week and get this taken care of. Dapper, are you in helping being a shop dog?
1 week later.
All right, picking up from where we left off, we have our replacement bracket for the shift linkage. This is the one that goes on the side of the body, and it's the one that had come loose and then sat there and danced around on top of the drive shaft and got banged up. We ended up opening up the holes just a little bit to allow us to install a nutsert. And it was a case of finding one that was going to get close enough to work. And so these end up being a 3/8 hardware, which is much larger, much beefier than what was there from the kit. But this will allow us to avoid having those rubber pieces in there. That is what actually failed for us last time. So we've installed the nutserts, we've ordered our new hardware, and now we get the fun job of installing this, which requires somebody to be above the body and probably somebody below the body. I have another set of hands here at the shop.
That would be me.
So we're going to use them, and we're going to play the over-under game.
So this was the combination that we used just to get off the trail or get back in camp. It worked okay, and the fender washers are definitely large for these wallowed out holes. We think the washers we've got on the new bolts, which are coated in Loctite, so I'm being careful with them, they should be big too, but realize that they're not quite as big, but we should be okay.
Okay, and this is our bottom bracket with the cable loosely started back into it, and our 4 holes up there. So this is going to be a sliding it up vaguely into place like so, and then April trying to start.
Bottom rear.
Yeah, that one finally started. Okay, that one looks like it's started. Okay, that one is started.
I got that one cross-threaded, didn't I?
Okay, so all 4 started. So now we're just going to snug them up. The torque spec on these is quite low because it's intended for those rubber grommets. So we're just going to go good and tight. Okay, next up we need to put the shift linkage here back together.
Okay.
Because the plate is flopping around loose.
Okay. Kenneth is dropping it down because we need to do some interior reinstallation first. So in diagnosing the issue, all of this was taken apart, including the trim piece, which is now sitting in the footwell here. And the next step in this process before we can reattach the shift linkage is to get this all set back up again so that we can actually set it up correctly. Come on, monkey, jump! Still needed a ladder and she's on the ground. Okay, albeit not all the way on the ground. And yes, for those of you that don't know Penny, that is a custom shift lever. It didn't work for me. I wanted a straight one, not the curved one that normally comes with TJs and LJs. I don't knock this one out of gear with my leg as much.
There is still a little bit of a notch there that holds.
Yeah, I remember we ground the gates down a while back.
Yep. Because they didn't line up with where the shift points were for the transfer case.
Right. I had the idea of doing just a tiny bit of cleanup here. We could put a loom on this, but it's not really visible. But putting a zip tie on it will help keep it cleaned up a little bit if this ever has to be taken apart again. Trim the end. Now you had me hop up here at one point, take this parking brake off. Do we need to make sure that's off again? Perfect. All right, brackets attached
Shift linkage is put back together on top. It's time to get it all connected together. Also make note, those of you with eagle eyes have already caught this. Transfer case is actually in 4-wheel drive. The lever is in 2-wheel drive. That's why it looks like nothing's about to fit.
So this is where we start to have to make some fine adjustments, because what you want to have happen is for things to just fit together. As I do this by braille.
No, really, he's not looking at what he's doing.
So you have some adjustability in the linkage here.
Can you back your hand off and show me where that adjustability is?
Okay, so right here, and this thread's on, and so you can thread it in or thread it out. And you also have some adjustability here at the housing.
Okay.
Now, I've made my housing as short as I can, so I need to make my cable longer, so I'm threading this out.
Oh, I see.
I think
You're through.
That's about it.
Yeah, you're through. So is it a washer and a nut now, as well as that jam nut that you're twisting your finger with?
Yes, so setting the jam nut just to kind of hold things in the right spot.
Back up in Penny. While she's in the air. Because I have to work on moving the lever. All right, slowly to 4 high. I think that's it.
More.
That's probably...
Okay, too far?
Yeah, that's all the way back.
There, stop.
That's 4 low?
So try to go back to 4 low hard.
4 low. That's as hard as it'll go.
Okay, come forward 1 notch. That should be neutral. Feels like neutral. 4 high. Looks like 4 high. 2 high. Looks like 2 high. Back to 4 high. Looks like 4 high. Neutral. Feels like a neutral. Feels like a neutral. 4 low. Feels like a 4 low. All right, so you got the view from up above as she was shifting it back and forth. This is what the linkage looks like all properly assembled. And again, the big thing was that we wanted to get the length such that when it was in the 2-wheel drive position inside and the 2-wheel drive position on the transfer case, that it just slipped in, that it wasn't under pressure, wasn't under tension. And we got it, and we've confirmed now that it shifts through all positions. And I'm going to put this little rubber boot back where it belongs, just helps keep dirt out of the interior of the cable. So now we just have to wrestle the drive shaft back up into the other side of it. And happily, again, with the skid plate out, it is possible to get your fingers back in here from the other side and be able to put bolts and nuts and things in place.
He's putting together the front. Ooh. Oops. We're out test driving, and so far so good. She's staying in gear every time I put her in gear, and hasn't popped out once.
And no strange, broken transfer case, broken gear, broken transmission kinds of noises.
And also, no smells of the clutch either. The clutch seems to be working just fine. I haven't really tested it or, drugged it, hit it on clutch grab, clutch bite. But so far so good. So in true test drive fashion, nothing happened. It did great.
It did what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, we tested
we're good.
it,
We'll
ran it through the gears.
finish buttoning it up and we'll be done.
Yeah, she's good to go again, ready to hit a trail. I should hop on a calendar and find out when the next trail run is.
It's supposed to be tomorrow.
Yeah, I got a dog show tomorrow. Zephyr's up for 2 titles. Gotta try to get him.